Hello there, everybody. Okay, so a couple updates. First of all, I'm going to be on a plane next Sunday, so I can't do the hangout. And then the Sunday following that, I won't be on the plane yet, but I think I may be indisposed. Possibly I could do the hangout, but I'll be traveling and probably not. So this is an announcement that for the next 2 weeks, there will not be an Illusions Exist hangout, unfortunately. And given that there's a group of people doing it, we could, if people wanted, um, open up a separate channel in the future. But I don't have time to do that right now, so I think it's just 2 weeks off. But if somebody else wants to pick up the thing, I'll make an announcement on my channel or whatever. And as I say, maybe we should have a channel for that hangout that other people could have the keys to. I certainly wouldn't mind in a situation like this if somebody else wanted to host it. Um, so anyway, yeah, Inventive Harvest or Hythloday or anybody, if you do want to jump on that in the next couple days, I guess it could be done. Um, so actually, maybe I could help it in the next couple days, but we'll see. Um, So the other thing is I want to talk about some of these logic issues, and there's the stuff in the Hangout with Hythloday, and then there's also this logic only zone, I think it is, that has made a video to me I've watched now, and one video to Inventive Harvest. And um, well, first of all, to Hythloday. So I think the situation, Hythloday, is that this method I've endorsed it, and you've talked about it a lot. We've discussed it, of making agreements step by step, and being willing to walk through the argument. Now, sometimes I wonder if you understand that people have the right to say, wait a second, this is where you're going with this argument. If that's your implication from that other statement, no, because let me qualify that other statement. And, I think sometimes, maybe we could have a difference in that regard, but that's just a detail. And I think right now what we're dealing with is we've walked through your question, getting back down to the axiomatic nature of the existence of something like two, and basically you just don't like our answer. Now it's my turn, let's say, and I am talking to you about this stream of information that we get and process, and that all of our knowledge, anything you want to claim about objects or anything else, it has to be substantiated in this stream. All knowledge really is a statement about this stream. And if you want to talk about existence, well, I say yes, two exists because it is a feature of this stream, but I also say that illusions exist. And just as if I go, hey, look, I've stayed up all night, it's sunrise. There's truth in that statement, even though the sun's not really rising, the earth is spinning. And so there's something to the phenomena of two, just like there's something to other phenomena. In that sense, I say it exists. But when you want to say no, there's a two-ness, and you get into showing two objects or two apples or two oranges or two things, it's just by a convention that we agree to identify those as objects, that we're ignoring all the other things that it's possible to identify as objects, that we limit our scope to these two things and assume that they're identifiable. And I think it's quite clear that in counting apples, and the two-ness of doing something like that, or the five-ness or eight-ness or whatever, it's clear that it's not about apples, because you can have a painting of a field and a tree, and you could count the apples in that, right? If you have enough cues to spike that's an apple identification experience, then you can count apples, and they don't have to be real. They don't ever have to have been real. And in fact, you can even learn how to identify imaginary things like a unicorn that has never been real at all. So I think you need to go through this step. You accept it at one point, but the stream of consciousness model, that it's fair to go back to that and say whatever we're claiming we have to explain within that model as well. But then you want to relent many times and just say, oh, well, you're asserting that. And I attribute that to the fact that there's that this model does in fact solve and sort of obsolete some of the concerns that you're bringing up about the epistemological reality or ontological reality of some concept. That it's useful that it can be described as a real phenomena the same way as seeing a horse can be, because it appears in the stream of information, um, it doesn't seem satisfactory to you. And so then you want to wait. No, I'm not. I don't agree to that. But you have to agree to that, or you have to declare that you wouldn't agree with that. So I think we do have to agree with that, and it's a very, very informative model for what we're doing. To remember, no, there is no grasping of an object. Let's just break it down to what's really going on. You're getting a stream of visual information. You image process all these frames of information and detect, hopefully, an object. But it could be a picture of an object. It could be, it's very flexible what that means. That detection truly is the event of a neurological machine, right? So it could detect wrong or whatever. It could be fooled, and just looking at everything as a stream of information, that's no problem for me. Just like the changing identity of the river, the fact that all the particles in the river are all new water particles all the time doesn't matter, because I'm identifying a system. The phenomena has persisted long enough to recognize, and I'm attributing an identity of it as a river. The Yosemite River, or the Merced River, or the Columbia River, and I'm giving it that identity, and there's some truth to that because the phenomena is real. It's not dependent on what molecules of water are in it. So it's a more powerful system in the end. But you have to remember that you don't get to assume that you're starting axiomatically from something like a number, a whole number. No, if you wanted to find your axiom, it has to be something about the state of the beginning state, of the baby state of a human mind. Processing information. Okay. It affects the kind of concepts you'll want to use. And for one, you don't use static concepts about being. You have to use concepts about doing and action and becoming and things like that. Now, logic only zone, the thing is, okay, so here's the thing, dude. I didn't really see you talk. First of all, you talk about logic like it's just one thing, and that's fine because you did say, well, what other logics? And but if you really like logic, you're going to have to deal with that this axiomatic nature of logic. To have a particular system of logic, you have to choose from alternative ways of doing things. And for example, there's modal logic, where you talk about, instead of, for all things X, blah, blah, there exists, you talk about possibilities and stuff. There's forms of logic where instead of having just true and false, like a 0 and a 1, you have shades of truth, so 40% true and 70% true. That actually works pretty good. It's kind of similar to concepts in so-called fuzzy logic, right? Now, if those don't suit you, if you think, oh, those are just toy logical systems, where there's a natural system called second-order logic. What most people are kind of thinking about when they think there's just one logic is, the Aristotle's predicate first-order logic, where you can variabilize over things. You can say there exists a thing X such that X is red, and that is a way of saying there's at least one red object, in the universe. Right, and you're variabilizing over the object there, because X could still be anything. Now that's first order logic, but you can't variabilize over that sentence. That sentence that X is red. You can't say for all sentences, P. There exists a P such that P implies A, where A is blah, blah, blah. You can't do that in first order logic. That's called second order logic. And that's an interesting logical system you might want to look into, because there were certain problems that Gödel proved with problems from a logician's point of view about what's provable. He proved that there are statements that are true or false that you can't prove true and false. They'll be true and false. It's not just that they're indeterminate like a paradox, but they'll be true or false, but you can't prove it. And that's kind of thing that bugs logicians usually. So the problem with that is that, of course, we do use concepts. We say, that's a terrible way to think. We are variabilizing. There exists a way of thinking that is acceptable and a way of thinking that is not. And you are quantifying and qualifying over predicates when you do most conceptual reasoning. So there's an issue. Another issue with just first order logic and applying it to life. And mind you, I generally endorse your idea that it's good to study the fallacies and try not to commit them. So that can go both ways. There's also the fallacy, for example. You got to think about that one. But anyway, um, where was I? So, a thing of first order logic that I don't really, I always found odd and makes it difficult to apply first order logic as much as I would like to. Because, mind you, I got a philosophy degree in philosophy. I love logic. I'm a programmer. I consider myself working in logic. And, I love logic. So, I want to apply it to things, including just everyday things, like you seem to say. So again, we agree on that sort of vibe or whatever, that intention. And with respect to that, the first order logic conditional always bothered me because I don't know if you know this, but in the whole, if A then B thing, what makes a conditional true in first order logic? Well, it just depends on the truth values of the antecedent and the consequent, right? So A is the antecedent. So if A, then B. Well, if A is true and B is true, then that statement is true, right? It doesn't matter if there's really a link between A and B. But it gets worse because if A is true and B is false, well, it's false, obviously, because A was true and B was false, so that statement isn't true. And where it gets weird, though, is if A is false, it doesn't matter whether B is true or not. Okay, and if you think about this in regular language, it's like, okay, if the moon is made of cheese, then I have a house on the moon. That would be true. And you could kind of say, okay, well, yeah, because if the totally crazy thing, then the totally other crazy thing, fine. But if I say that if the moon is made of cheese, I don't have a house on the moon, that's also true. So that's kind of bizarre. And it seems a little broken already to me. But where I really don't like it is you can apply it to lots of things that are part of the kind of reasoning that a human has to do in their regular life, and it just shows that logic isn't going to work. Because, for example, let's say I say, if a tsunami hits Denver, let's pretend I live in Denver. If a tsunami hits Denver, my house in Denver will be flooded. Right? If a tsunami hits Denver, my low-lying house in Denver is going to get flooded. Right? Now, that seems true because a tsunami would be a bunch of water hitting Denver. Now, in first order logic, it's true because a tsunami is never going to hit Denver. It's also true that if a tsunami hits Denver, my low-lying house in Denver is in no danger whatsoever. That's also true because first order logic doesn't really care what the semantic link is between the antecedent and the consequent. And that is kind of a problem. Now, it's not a problem in mathematical reasoning. You can come up with a set theory or other theories with first order logic and achieve mathematics and arithmetic. That's pretty awesome. Okay, so it's powerful, but that's limiting because in our lives we deal with if this, because of the meaning of this, then that, because the meaning of that is related, not just because it's a coincidence. In other words, there's a kind of phenomenological fallacy built into logic that if two things both happen to be true, then you can create this conditional out of them, which is like, what? And I would say that that works in mathematics because of the tautological way all the pieces are created, that it's actually okay that if two things are true, they'll end up being related because of this other simplification that you've made in the whole schemata of a simple logical system, a simple first order logical system. And when we want to apply logic to real life, though, then we've got to be open-minded to more sophisticated logical systems and fuzzy logic and changing or keeping first-order logic sounding like it is, but changing what we think the excluded middle actually means. Because the excluded middle is only true because you're ignoring everything that's in the middle. It's like things in the middle aren't part of this logical inference chain, right? Doesn't actually mean that they don't exist. So, uh, okay, well, that's a good 15 minutes. So we'll just leave it at that. Cheers. I'd be happy to talk to you more about it, or to have you show up to one of the Hangouts, which, as I said, I won't be able to hold probably for 2 weeks. 2 weeks we will be on vacation, just like real time with Bill Maher. You gotta go on vacation, I guess. But it's not really vacation. I'll be working, so what the fuck? Okay, I'm happy about that actually. Okay, cheers.